Oh my gosh, we are live. Welcome to Easy to Read Deep Thoughts. Our special guest this week is Adrian Ramsey, one of my business advisors. Oh my gosh, how long has it been? 2 years, 3 years? Probably
You know
three
what?
years, eh?
Whatever it is, it's been wonderful.
Oh my gosh. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Holy cow. I just moved us off of the post I was going to read so we could talk about that scheduling thing. So I am going to find this as you are introducing yourself. Okay, let me start off with a quick introduction, then I'll describe the structure of the show, and then we will dive into it. My name is Jonathan Geyer. Noteworthy note, I helped implement the health information exchange for the state of Minnesota, and I was stationed in St. Cloud, VA. In that opportunity, I was able to sit down and drink a cup of coffee with 30 some odd thousand veterans. Every veteran in the St. Cloud system was scheduled to come have a conversation with me. Why is that important? Because it changed how I think. A lot of my communication style now, this animate hand throwing, comes from talking with all these veterans. Good stuff. Secondary note: I coach a boxing class here in St. Cloud, and when our class maxed out, we started streaming it on YouTube. Figuring similar to church service, if my wife and I can't make it in, we'll still watch it from home. Well, that turned out to be a big deal, and we are coming up on 400,000 views, and people from all over the world are watching our class. Or you could say I'm a coach for people all over the world. It's resonating, and yeah, easy to read deep thoughts seems to be playing out the same way. Adrian, please introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. My name is Adrian Ramsey. As Jonathan said, we've known each other for years. I just can't tell you how many. Jonathan reached out to me on LinkedIn, and we started to chit chat and develop a friendship. And he invited me on. My background is I'm a recovering engineer who transitioned from program management into working with the government as a government employee, and now I own my own company, Delphi Strategies, where I help people understand the federal government as well as how to communicate and link their resources to ROI results. So, Jonathan, did I do enough time for you to find what you were looking for?
Yes, ma'am. That was perfect. High five.
High five.
Awesome. Okay, structure. We are going to read this a paragraph at a time. And really, this is just the newsletter is an excuse for good conversation, or it's really just to inspire conversation. It actually works out pretty slick. It's kind of like an agenda. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so my ask to you, Adrian, is if you have an idea, stop me, speak, or bring it up. And really, yeah, that's the goal is natural conversation more than anything else. Let me dive into it. The U.S. Congress. Our special guest this week is Adrian Ramsey of Delphi Strategies. She teaches, coaches, and guides companies on how to interact with our U.S. Congress. Adrian and I met 3 years ago, and as a business advisor, which is true, she played a key role in guiding me to my current successes. Okay, well, speaking of just jumping in, so when you and I first met, I was using the Myers-Briggs personality framework for my algorithm, right? And that is complicated. Oh my gosh, I forget how many. There's like 16 different options for labeling, right? And you recommended I switch over to the disc. That was a breakthrough kind of moment. Why? Because it simplified everything. It made it easier. Like a reduction, by the factor of 4? There was. Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, Congress. On this week's or on the weeks we have guests. I write this Wednesday newsletter independently, solo. And actually, that's I'm talking fast. That is a key point. That's like the cool part of this show is I write this newsletter without talking to you, and then we talk about the newsletter that I wrote without talking to you, and I might be wrong, or I'm writing this on your subject without talking to you. Yeah, super. I'm setting myself up to be wrong, so I'm setting my guests up to correct me. And in my mind, in my perspective, that's like a real conversation, right?
Yeah, I love it. So why don't we talk about Congress?
I like it. Jump on there again. Jump in whenever. I'm just going to keep reading until you have something to say.
Okay, keep reading.
Okay. I forgot where it was at.
Well, how about this? I'll start with this. I did not start my career thinking that I was going to become a government employee and or a government, work in Congress at all. And one of the things that what I wanted to do, or what I thought I wanted to do at that time, was I wanted to design satellites. I wanted to go to space. I wanted to do all of that. And I did that. And I did it for the government as a contractor. And I had a ton of misconceptions and misperceptions, regardless of my schooling, on how the federal government works, because the federal government itself is not necessarily a unified and or homogenous alike organization. It's incredibly tribal. And what I really liked about Congress, which is not, again, a single entity, it's multiple entities. It's the House and the Senate. It's the majority and the minority. It's the, it's the committees versus the personal staff. And when I say versus, it isn't, but you have to understand what the incentive structure is for each of these organizations in order to better communicate with them. And then on top of all of that, just like any sort of profession, whether it's medical or engineering or sports or media or whatnot, there's their own set of vocabulary. And again, in that learning of how to take this organization and look at each piece parts of it, you start to get a better understanding of why they do what they do. So to say the Congress or the federal government is sort of a disservice to them, because I think, in my opinion, since they are not an entire unified organization, and each has their own sort of pushes and pulls, you have to understand the piece parts and then try to build up from there when you're creating a strategy, when you're looking to work with them, when you're discussing them.
Oh my gosh. I speak to this a little bit lower in the article, but holy cow, I love these kinds of conversations. I love thinking about this kind of stuff. Oh my gosh, I was active listening. So let's see if I can remember that thought that popped into my head. You're speaking to tribal knowledge. Oh my gosh, maybe I should just skip over. But really, why is the government structured the way it's structured, right? And the tribalness, like we as human beings, regardless of government, families are tribal, right? Like how do you navigate this natural opposition to other people, because it's, yeah.
I think it's not necessarily opposition to other people. I think it is a question of understanding where people are motivated. And this is when we start to talk with regards to Myers-Briggs versus the DISC assessment. It's understanding what people's incentives are to help you, to lean in, to oppose you, etc. It's not a them or us. It's a how do I understand them to understand how they can help us. So I think that any organization, it can be a family of two, and you're going to have pushes and pulls because you each have your own way of thinking. If you look at the federal government, you have the executive branch and you have the legislative branch, and then you have the judicial branch as well. Each one has its own roles and responsibilities. Within the executive branch, if you want to make the analogy to a company, they are the people who do things. They are the people who actually execute what is strategized, what is funded by the legislative branch. You have to understand this. And oh, by the way, because it is an organization of millions of people, the 350 plus million people who are in the United States, the 150 plus million people who are voters, the single president, but of this country has to execute. But it's not necessarily everybody's going to get 100% of what they want. And that's where I think when you talk about what Congress is supposed to do, it's so important because they are your representatives. You have 3 people up on the Hill who want to talk to you every single day and twice on Sunday. Why? Because they represent you. You have your 2 senators and you have your 1 representative. The 435 members of Congress who are representatives represent about 750,000 people, where the senators represent, you have 2 per state, each state. So you have this different layering of people who want to talk to you and who want to help and who want to hear what you have to say because their jobs depend on it. Now, if you go further afield because you have an issue that spans the United States or a sector to other members of Congress, at that point, you're going to start to see sort of a push and pull of who's going to be allies, who are going to be adversaries, and who are neutral. So it's, again, understanding what their motivations are and where they're going. And again, that just takes time and research.
Oh my gosh, that segues to my current perspective. The more I learn, the more I appreciate it. Right? All its flaws. Like, it has flaws because humans are flawed. Right?
Yeah. I mean, this is hard. This is, my husband and I, we are a family of two, and we always have a conversation of what we're going to have for dinner. I mean, it's hard getting two people moving in the same direction. Now try to get a majority of these people moving in a direction, you're going to see something different. And in the House, you have to get 218 of the 435 votes moving in the same direction and saying, yeah, I agree with this, to get something passed. I mean, that's a hell of an extended family. And in the Senate, you have to get to 60 rather than 51 to shut down debate. And then you do a simple majority of the 51 to get something passed. And everybody has to give something, and everybody has to have something taken away from them for everybody to feel, in my opinion, that everybody has lost something. There's no one winner. There's no one loser. It has to be a huge compromise. And, people talk about how things are not moving fast enough. Well, it's 20 to 30 minutes for us to figure out what to have for dinner. Just imagine trying to get 218 people to agree, or to not disagree so vehemently that they vote no.
Oh my gosh. I'm a visual thinker, and how I'm picturing what you're describing now, or what's playing out in my mind, you have depth to this. Like, the surface level structure is the government, is the strategies and the systems that are put in place. But then you have all the environmental variants, like what we agree on right now at whatever time, 12:12, might be different at 12:13. Why? Because the environment changed. Mm-hmm. Like, we have no control over,
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, this is not easy. This is not straightforward. This is not A goes to B, goes to C, goes to D. This is a very, very interconnected organism of people at different levels, at different places. And when I say levels, again, representing 750,000 people like a member of Congress does, a representative does, versus a state the size of California, and there are 2 senators for that, you have different pushes and pulls. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is a system that requires checks and balances. This is an elegant system that, when executed, and it is executing, please don't think that I don't think that the system works. The system does work, and it's not supposed to be go fast and break things, because when you go fast and break things, there are people's lives on the brink. It's a very slow, methodical set of choices. If you want to go fast and break things, you are either in an autocratic society where one person's choosing, and there are going to be a lot of people who are left behind, or you are in a party of one, and that is not our nation. And I think that the fact of the matter is that there's a wonderful system, processes, regardless of your politics, but it works because these people, members and their staff, want to hear from you. Because if you don't voice, they won't know where to go. And you have a voice every 2 years to reelect your member of Congress, every 6 years to reelect your senators, every 4 years to reelect your president. You have to exercise that. But it's not just I do it once every 2, 4, and 6 years. Or every 2 years, I guess I should say. It is, you have to call in, you have to tell them what you want. And if you don't like it, you can vote them out. So again, I think it is a very, very elegant system. And believe you me, I did not go to school for this. I did not say I want to work in this. I wanted to build satellites. I wanted to go to space. That being said, when I got into it and I started to understand the pushes and pulls and the complexity and the depth, it is a beautiful system that we created, our founders created. The founders created a framework that actually has a lot of give and take in it in order for us to grow. But it is a dynamic system. And just like Jonathan and I talking about Myers-Briggs or DISC assessment or whatnot, there are different personality types. There are different archetypes that come into play Not everybody stands on the steps of the Capitol and screams at the top of their lungs. You also have people who are devoted legislators who are about crafting meticulous bills in order to help move us forward in our goals. So, the fact that Jonathan has asked me to do this and me being able to speak on something that I really like a great deal and I want to share as much as I possibly can, A, how it works, and B, how it can work for you and to get your goals done is tremendous, because again, I still think it is about understanding the people involved, understanding the incentives that they are working with in order to better communicate with them.
Oh my gosh, it's possibly too complex to say live here on the show. But so you have the system, then you have the people within the system, and then you have call them voters or citizens or whatever. And you just spoke to the citizens. Like, this is what I don't know. I'm thinking it's like chronologically dependent, because the parents understand doesn't guarantee that the kids understand. That information, there's a loss in translation between the generations, right? So like, we will perpetually or forever need to get to educate the next generation, because it's not guaranteed to translate through, or
Well, and look, the Congress of 20 years ago, of 100 years ago, of 200 years ago is different, but it's also the same, because again, we're talking about the Constitution as a framework. The legislative body has rules associated, which are updated every 2 years for the House, every 2 years for the Senate. They change the rules a little bit. They are dynamic organizations, but the framework holds. And the framework is just that. It's the Christmas tree that you then put your ornaments on. And sometimes you get new ornaments, and sometimes you change how you want to decorate it. But the Christmas tree itself is still there. So again, I think it's a question associated with, A, education is great. Please, 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 always talk about this. It doesn't have to be capital P politics, because that will make people mad. However, the processes, the mechanisms that are used, the terminology of what's going on is super, super consistent and super, super important. And it is a dialogue. And you could say, well, Congress is different than, my day-to-day life. It isn't, because we all have budgets. We all have things that we have to do. We all have, it's a very similar, it's the same, but different, because the language is different.
Oh my gosh. We could probably read the article at some point here. I'm thinking, you mentioned engineering. Now I'm picturing it. So when we build a bridge, we build bridges to give a little bit, right? When we build a skyscraper, we build skyscrapers to give a little bit. We build into the process the give. Why? Because solid structures crumble. They break. They can't handle that environmental variance or whatnot. This is how it works for me. But I picture like a carburetor. Carburetor is the vacuum operated carburetor. They're built on weights, right? So it changes your fuel based on the speed. Whatever, it can handle the environmental variance because it's built with control lines more than absolutes, right? Mm-hmm. It works from here and it works down to here and it works everywhere in between. I picture our structure of laws working like a carburetor. It's built for stuff that you don't know. Like, you don't know what the weather's going to be like tomorrow, so you build it the best you can for these known unknowns. It's a flexibility.
It is a flexibility. And, look, I know that people talk about laws. I know people talk about, the law says this, and this. But again, the judicial branch is there to interpret the laws, to pressure test the laws, to say, do these actually make sense? And that's something, again, you may not like when the Supreme Court comes down with a ruling. You might love it. However, it is a dynamic organization. And truly, truly, my time, in Congress as staff, I worked for Democrats, I worked for Republicans, I worked always in the majority. But the fact is that these legislators are not trying to, stand in the way of you in particular. Again, this comes back to their incentive structure. Who are they reporting back to? Who do they have to get reelected by? How do they show value? And I think that this is true in any organization, whether it's Congress or your company or whatnot, is you are always trying to show value to your employer. And in the case of Congress, the employer are the constituents that they represent. And it is, it's very easy to tell people, the sky is always going to be sunny and unless, everything is going to come up roses and the like. It's harder to say, you know what, this is going to be a rough ride. Please let me be part of the solution. And I think that this sort of concern that people have, which is it's not moving fast, they're not listening to me, any number of these things, this is where engagement is required. I know that my personal telepathy does not work. Therefore, I have to have a communication. If my husband's upset with me, I have said to him, I don't read your mind. Please tell me. Sometimes I can see that, but the fact of the matter is that you have to tell people, especially your elected individuals, what you like and what you don't like and why. So if you don't like inflation, I got it. I hate paying more for my groceries, for everything, for clothing, for my car, etc. However, what Congress can do, what the president can do with regards to inflation, those levers are very minor. They have only a little bit. A lot of this has to do with supply chains, tariffs, taxes, etc. However, if you want something like your taxes to go down and you expect that you can get something for nothing, my conversation associated with that one is, I respectfully disagree. You're going to have to pay for it because people have to go do this. So I think that there's a lot of questions, and this is a little bit further afield than just Congress itself, is the knock-on effects. Yeah, it's really nice to hear what's going on, but what are the secondary and tertiary effects that can happen from what you're suggesting? I want, lower taxes. Well, I'm not going to get this service. This is going to be cut back. Or I'm going to have to take debt. And again, if you can personalize it, because again, we all have households, we all have, bills that come in, whether they're rent or mortgage, we need a car or transportation, we certainly need food. There's a certain amount of, you can make allegories and or, comparisons between the federal world and your personal world. And I think it's one of those things that if you unpack it and take the big P politics out of it, very quickly you're going to see that this system is very understandable. And then you're going to know how to interface with it.
Oh my gosh. I speak in my mind, active listening, but like cognitive bias has popped up a few times over. A lot of people I speak with don't know what that is, or they haven't thought about it. And that's that's one of those important blocks of information. Oh my gosh, I was going to say something else, but I forgot it. I'm going to dive right in. We are in our last 7 minutes, not a cartoon. At some point, all business growth for all businesses in all of America will be impacted by choices made by Congress. You just spoke to that. Congress impacts everything you know and care about. Yep. Kids or kicker. As kids, most Americans learned how the government works from cartoons. I didn't. And early school projects. As adults, most perceive how it works from catchy radio ads and 24 hours news channels. And that also, you just spoke to that too, but that's yeah. Oh my gosh, we could spend hours talking about that one, right? Like it's that speaks to the system, because on the surface level, it varies all over the place. The system, the foundation has to be rock solid and flexible. Oh my gosh, that's confusing. 80% important, 20% understanding. I'm just going to skip over that. From my current state perspective, I've caught some things those around me haven't thought of yet. We were just speaking to that. Specifically, the interaction between, I like this paragraph. Specifically, the interaction between writing and perception, or what's written in our laws and how readers perceive the writing they're reading. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio. Oh my gosh. Speaking of rabbit holes, this is one I love to dive into. What one person reads and understands could be different from the next person who reads and comes to an understanding. You and I have talked about this a few times over. Oh my gosh, I wish I could have this conversation with more, but there's a very limited who do you talk to about this? Like I can spend days on this point right here. Like give me a toga.
So I
in
was thinking,
Greece. Yeah.
I was thinking about this. I had a conversation with a new colleague today, and one of the things that I think is the most important thing, and this is why I love doing what I do with Delphi Strategies, and why I love talking with you, Jonathan, and other people, is I sometimes think that when you are inside the system, it's really hard to step out and to think outside the guardrails that are there. So again, if that's what you're used to, there are certain assumptions that your mind makes. And the fact is that you're like, oh, there's a guardrail there. When I first started working in industry, I was on a program and I came in and I had no understanding of what limitations were. I mean, I understood the physics limitations of something, but I didn't necessarily understand the political and or the organizational limitations. And therefore, I was able to occasionally step over in a positive way because I wasn't held back by preconceptions. In another way, I stepped over a couple of times with a very detrimental effect because I didn't understand the politics of it. So I think that there's a real benefit, regardless of where you are, is to have people who have a diversity of thought, a diversity of experiences. Because if you have that, you're going to have the ability to see. I've always thought of it like a set of facets. And I bring this back to when I was interviewing for college. My interviewer said, Adrian, why do you think that there are so many departments on a university campus? And my answer was this. I said, well, because I think different people want to learn in different ways. And he said, I'll take this one step further. To understand the universe, you have to see it through many different facets. So these departments each look at the universe in a different way. So when talking about problems, when talking about solutions, when talking about what should go into a law, what shouldn't go into a law, what should go into a policy, what should go into a vision. I think you need to have that diversity of thought. And that's where Jonathan's use of DISC in order to have a common way to interact with people, to have constructive conversations, not destructive conversations, is absolutely one of those things that makes this incredibly important. And again, I will say that whether you're talking to people in the legislative branch, if you're talking to people in the executive branch, depending on their agencies, they're going to have a different point of view. So you're going to have to understand, again, not just what their incentive structure is, but how do they communicate? Because if I go into a foreign country and start speaking English, I am relying on people to speak English back to me, not to speak their language. So there's going to be a disconnect in how we perceive the universe. Maybe slightly. And when I say I perceive the universe, but how we can interact, because we're going to be limited by our language barrier. And Jonathan's going to be kind enough to let me say this. I hope that if there is a question associated with this, please reach out to me. I would love to discuss it, but also I am right now putting, I won't say the final touches, I'm on my third draft of my book, which is called A Field Guide to Congress. So hopefully that will be coming out before, I would say, springtime of 2025. And hopefully that will help you get some of the language in order to interact and work with Congress, and hopefully work with me.
Oh my gosh, we are totally going to have you back on the show when that's ready. Let's film it a little heavier. Oh my gosh, we are in our last minute and 10 seconds. And this next line, I'm not going to go anywhere. We just covered it, but holy cow, I was patting myself on the back when I wrote it. Dichotomies are bad, not good. And oh my gosh, this is a rabbit hole. We're out of time here. I can't describe it. I won't be able to dive too much. The government. This is the people say it's good, people say it's bad, left, right, up, down, whatever it may be. We are naturally skewed towards I like saying dichotomies, it's just a fancy word, but we are naturally skewed to this binary way of perceiving the world, right? But it doesn't actually work like that. We work in probabilities.
It's not digital, it's not on off, it's not good, bad, it's all a spectrum, it's all degrees. And again, I think that there's some really, really bad things out there. Full stop. Yes, ma'am. However, somebody else might think that they're not as bad. And it's a question of where do you want to put your priorities and what do you want to emphasize?
Oh my gosh, we are in our last 10 seconds here. We're going to go a little bit over. I'm going to ambush you with an ask. What is the one thing you would like our audience to take away from this? Just one good sense. What the closing thought?
I would love the audience to understand that Congress is not your enemy. Congress is there to serve. And I would love, 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 love for people to interact in a positive, constructive manner with the legislatures, whether it's federal, state, or local, and work with them because they are there to represent you.
Yes, ma'am. Oh my gosh, that was a good one. Adrian, thank you.
Jonathan, thank you.
Holy cow. We put your information in the comment section for this post. Please reach out, and we will have you on again when your book is ready.
I would love that. Thank you so very much, and happy holidays to everybody and Happy New Year.
Yes, ma'am. Awesome. Thank you.